You talked about the difference that you distinguish between emotional regulation and emotional inhibition, and you said emotional regulation is kind of like having the right emotions at the right time. First off, is that right? And then emotional inhibition, how do you describe that?
Emotional inhibition is simply trying to like play whack-a-mole with your emotions. Every time an uncomfortable emotion arises, you're like, "Oh, gotta get rid of that. I gotta get rid of that. I must be happy at all times." Who thinks we should be happy at all times? I mean, there's kind of this assumption that like you're supposed to be somewhat, in a joyful mood, and if you're not, then you can blame it on trauma. Like that's the kind of narrative we have going around our society right now. But it's perfectly normal to feel anxious. It's perfectly normal to feel trepidation, fear. Um, uh, you can go through the whole list of uncomfortable emotions, jealousy. Um, but also, all these things can be really fueled into what you want to do. Emotions like jealousy and competitiveness, can really launch someone to greatness, especially creative greatness. I don't treat any of these things as things that should be eradicated from the kingdom.
No, I think that's a really good point. I think a lot of people do think that negative emotions are simply a bad thing. It's like no emotions are necessarily bad. It's just how you use them, right? Like if you have a negative emotion, I think that should be a piece of feedback and piece of information for you to be like, okay, why am I experiencing this negative emotion? Either what do I not have, or what kind of state is putting me in this, and what can I do to leverage this negative emotion and channel it in a positive way? Like you just said, some negative emotions can be really good fuel and provide you with a sense of urgency to do great things.
Yes, I should be interviewing you.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Everybody would be very bored out of their mind. In the description, thanks, thanks. I'm interested. In part of the about the book, you talk about there's a double-edged sword of self-esteem. Talk to me about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean there is a double-edged sword in the sense that we want to feel like we're worthy, we're competent, but it can also lead to overconfidence, a lack of humility, and not a realistic understanding or realistic view of where you are in the social world and how people are viewing you. Um, so low self-esteem can be a good thing. I mean, maybe that's a controversial thing to say in my new book, but it's really just a sign, a signpost, or it's an indicator, just like all of our emotions are. That may be something to look into or pay attention to. If we keep getting rejected over and over again, and it leads to a low self-esteem, yes, you can have a victim mentality. Sure, it's very easy to then just blame all 50 people for rejecting you and saying haters gonna hate, but you're probably not gonna grow, and you're probably not gonna learn anything, you know. So I don't know. I think it's okay to have moments of low self-esteem, moments of high self-esteem. I think the person who has high self-esteem all the time, 24/7, no matter what, I think is a dangerous person.
Yeah, no, 100%. Right. There's always like, there's times and places for each of these things and spectrums for each of these things, right? Like, I think there's a balance and a duality of you need to be confident in your abilities that you actually have, but you also need to be fully aware of the fact that you don't have so many different abilities and you don't have a ton of knowledge, and you need to be humble in that fact and realize that, hey, this is actually an opportunity to grow. Because don't feel like if you feel like you have all the knowledge, then you're not going to seek out any knowledge. And so you need to have that balance of both of those things.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself.